Morning everyone, I'm Pete Waddingham. I'm the Net Zero lead for the Academic Health Science Network. Welcome to this AHSN Network sharing and learning event on data, carbon accounting and monitoring impact. I just wanted to provide a very quick 1 minute rationale of why I've put this session together and some of the objectives. So I really want to shine a spotlight on this important, which I'd say is actually a fundamental topic. If we're going to achieve net zero, we absolutely need to understand where we are now, where we're heading, and hopefully monitor and celebrate success along the way. I'm going to be shining a spotlight and highlighting some examples of innovators that are supporting both the NHS as of now and its supply chain. So you'll hear from some brilliant speakers, as I said. I'd also like to, some of the innovators are working outside of the NHS, and I always think it's really important to show that different perspective so that we're not always looking insular. So, some of the innovators that you'll hear from today, working with some big clients outside of the NHS, and again, with that comes some learning. This session isn't just going to be about carbon accounting necessarily. I'll say that's really important, but actually, how do we begin to plan, develop a plan, monitor the impact, change behaviour and improve that engagement? These are all fundamental building blocks to get into net zero. So I didn't want this to be just around quantification of carbon. Obviously, you'll hear a lot about that today, but actually there's some of the other little pieces of the jigsaw that are vitally important. I'm going to provide myself a little bit of policy context really quickly, just for 30 seconds. But at the end, we've got NHS England coming along to speak about the work that they're doing to support suppliers for the NHS and some other work. So that's brilliant. We can show you exactly what's happening in the NHS. And last but not least, I'm hoping to inspire some collaboration opportunities today, both with the innovators that we've got on the call, with the NHS providers and the supply chain. So please, if you hear something that you like, if you want to find out more information, as I said, please do connect. So yeah, just a little bit of policy context really quickly. You're probably aware of most of this, but in 2022, the NHS became the first health system to embed net zero into legislation through the Health and Care Act. And that therefore puts commitments on both the NHS and its suppliers to achieve net zero. So all suppliers of new contracts for goods and services need to produce a carbon reduction plan for their emissions. And again, you're going to hear about how to go about that today. But actually, I just put this one down as well. I mean, from April 2028, which might sound a long way away, but actually in the grand scheme of it, it's not. But they're going to start looking at carbon footprinting for individual products that are being supplied to the NHS. And again, you'll hear people that are starting to give some thinking around that. And actually, from an NHS perspective, each integrated care board system has to develop its own green plan, and they've been doing that at the moment, and they've already been doing that, should I say. And that needs to pull together the strategies of each of its member organisations, which actually each ICB has a lot of member organisations. When you think about the hospital trust, the community providers, primary care, and even working in collaboration with the local authorities. And as part of that green plan, they have to develop and refine actions to help reduce carbon emissions and develop the systems and processes to measure and report on the impact against those plans. And that is why I wanted to put this session together, because I've been talking to a lot of people across the patch, suppliers, the NHS. It's not an easy topic, but as I said, it's absolutely fundamental. So thank you for joining today. I probably should just say this really quickly for 10 seconds. I work for the Academic Health Science Network. If you're not familiar who the AHSN network are, they're a network of networks. I previously used to work for the Yorkshire and Humber AHSN. I'm still hosted by them. And we've got a brilliant website that's just been revamped and launched. So I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with the work of the AHSN network, please check out our website, follow us on social media. You'll see some of the brilliant work that we're involved in across a range of topics, net zero being one of them. So yeah, just a little bit of a shout out to the entity that I work for. But we're here to listen to speakers. As I said, I've got a brilliant lineup. I'm absolutely looking forward to this because I'm maybe a bit sad, but I absolutely love data, and I think it is, as I said, vitally important. So Annalise is going to kick off. She'll give a kind of, again, a bit of an NHS feel and perspective, which I think is vitally important. And then we're going to get into hearing from some of our innovators. So we've got supply pilot, CO2 analysis, smart carbon, Zellar, Salesforce, Isumio, track my carbon, recipe book, jump. And last but not least, as I say, we've got Alex Hammond wrapping up, giving a flavour of some of the NHS England work that's happening. So if it's okay, Annalisa, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks again for joining, and yeah, really looking forward to this session.
Thanks, Pete. just going to drop some details in the chat box there and then share my screen.
There we go. I'll just add you to the spotlight, and so I'll just take Adam you off. There we go. The stage is all yours.
Takes a while to get everything organised there, doesn't it? Pete, can you see my slides? Okay.
We can. You're all good to go.
And I've dropped some information in the chat box with my contact details as well. So yeah, start my timer. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to come along to this event. And very pleased to share a case study from a Newcastle hospital's perspective. As you can see, we have been recognised with quite a few awards, which we're very proud of, including an AHSN Network Innovate Award for the work that we're doing with measuring carbon footprint and in particular supply chain. So, advances. My first slide is just to make it clear that I'm sure, like a lot of people on this call, I do wear many hats. And I'm happy to be invited along today as a representative of the NHS. I work at Newcastle Hospitals part-time. I'm the sustainability manager there as part of James Dixon's team, and I've been there for nearly 3 years. But as you will see, I'm also the director of Smart Carbon, set that up in 2016, as well as teaching at Northumbria University. I'm a member of IEMA's Climate Change and Energy Steering Group and a climate reality leader. And that's before you add the hat of being a mum and a grandmother and all of the many things that we all juggle, so I'm sure you can identify. So the focus of today is to talk about Newcastle Hospitals and our net zero story. So I've actually broken it into 2 parts, which is going to be tricky in my 10 minutes. But I want to first of all talk about footprint before we get into Footprint Plus, which I realise is the focus of the session today. But I do think it's really important to get your own house in order first before you start asking suppliers to report what their performance is. So we thought we'd use a consistent approach as to what we would be asking suppliers. So we need to measure and report annual progress towards our own net zero target and our own carbon reduction plan. And you'll see that's by 2030. We then have a target for supplier engagement to aim to reach net zero by 2040. Now, those dates are different to the default NHS targets, which are 2040 and 2045 respectively. Obviously, each trust can set its own targets in addition to the NHS greener targets. And one of the reasons I applied to work at Newcastle Hospitals was because of the reputation that they had already established for leading in this space. So just to tell you a little bit about Newcastle Hospitals, it's one of the largest in the UK, part of the Shelford Group of Trust. This screenshot on the right is Geordie Hospitals, a TV show. I don't know if anybody's watched that, but it's wonderful and makes me feel very, very proud to be part of the organisation. But I've highlighted in red the bits that are of most importance to this session, which is the £780 million annual spend, and that's once we take salaries and pay out of that. For me, that's a huge opportunity. That's a lever for change. That's something we can use to nudge our supply chain towards net zero. And we were the first healthcare organisation in the world to declare a climate, and importantly, a climate and health emergency. So some other organisations outside of the sector had declared a climate emergency, like several local authorities, for instance, and some private companies. But it was the fact that our CEO, Dame Jackie Daniel, was the first to say that the climate emergency is actually a health emergency threatening our #1 priority, which is our patients. So this is our CEO, Dame Jackie Daniel, and what it means to declare a climate emergency. So it's a public acknowledgement of the climate crisis, which threatens population health. It's a commitment to fast tracking the reduction of our carbon emissions and in line with what science demands. And it's a commitment to collaborative action to deliver a net zero carbon Newcastle. So for that reason, we're also signed up to the UNFCCC Race to Zero, for instance. Those are all underpinning reasons why our targets are that bit sooner than the default ones that are applied to all NHS trusts. And of course, collaboration includes collaborating with our suppliers as well. So in the list of links that I've put in the chat box, you will also see a link to our climate emergency strategy. That's a 5-year strategy. We're nearly halfway through that. But within that, we've got 3 goals: zero carbon, clean air, zero waste. And obviously the ones that we're focusing on today are the zero carbon. So step 1 involved measuring, reporting our own performance, getting our own house in order and tracking progress towards that 2030 net zero target. So this one slide kind of summarises the approach. So the Trust had been measuring and reporting their carbon footprint since 2009. Historically, that was a number of Excel spreadsheets, that was using ERIC data, that was, you know, a good attempt with what was available. But when I joined the organisation, the first thing I did was to recalculate the 2019 figures that had already been published. We brought in a master's student to work with us, and we used the greenhouse gas protocol, which is the most widely recognised methodology for measuring a carbon footprint. We put that all through the Smart Carbon platform. It was funded through the North East Local Enterprise Partnership, so there was actually zero cost to Newcastle hospitals, because it meant that we were evolving the existing platform so that it would be fit for purpose for the healthcare sector. And incorporating, you know, bespoke factors like anaesthetic gases and inhalers and so on. And by going through that exercise, what we found in the bottom right table, you'll see the 2019 figures we republished, we restated our base year, and there was a 43% uplift in the carbon emissions. Now, that is purely a result of a more robust methodology and a more accurate reporting process. So it really shows the importance of moving beyond Excel spreadsheets and following a recognised framework like the greenhouse gas protocol. What it means is that we have a robust baseline now in 2019 that we can benchmark and track our performance towards net zero against. So this is from our most recent sustainability report. Again, the link is in the chat box there. And what you can see is our base year, you know, previous year, is current year, previous year and base year. And the far column on the right hand side shows percentage change. There's a lot of good news stories in there. We've slashed our emissions from anaesthetic gases. Trust fleet emissions are down 78%, water down nearly 50%, business travel nearly 50%. Lots of good news stories, but we've 2 key hurdles or challenges, and one is energy, which has gone up 30%, and the other is procurement, which has gone up 50%. Now, what you'll see on the right-hand side, the pie chart, the blue section shows that procurement actually makes up over 70% of our carbon emissions. So it's the biggest part of our carbon footprint, and it's also the one that's growing at the biggest rate, going in the wrong direction. So what we've been able to do then with this platform and being able to measure and track our performance annually is we have a carbon reduction budget that's aligned with science. We developed that in line with the in collaboration with the Tyndall Centre at Manchester University, and it means we can track our performance. What we were finding before was year on year, the team were getting better at what to report, a more accurate, more complete, more inclusive process, but that just meant our emissions were ballooning. What we're doing now is we have a robust procedure that we can consistently replicate year on year and track our performance, and you'll see it is reducing, but not reducing anywhere near enough, which is the main message within our most recent report. But you'll see over here that the shaded section here is procurement. The biggest growth, the biggest area of concern is procurement. So step 2 then is looking at our footprint plus and supplier engagement. So the first thing we did was an initial screening exercise. So that's a very simple, very straightforward exercise. Essentially, we got the data from our finance team, took no time at all, put that into Excel, and that gave us on the top chart, you will see that is our proportion of spend by E-class category. So we can see where we're spending our money as a trust, predominantly.
Last minute, sorry to interrupt, Annalisa, just last minute, if that's okay, if you wouldn't mind just wrapping up as well.
Thanks, Pete. And then we moved on to use the E-class factors then to look at carbon. But that's a screening process. The problem with that is these factors are arbitrary. They were developed in 2007, and the emissions are increasing because our spend is increasing. Most importantly, it doesn't capture any real life reduction of individual suppliers, and it's impossible to track progress towards net zero. So I'll leave this for Alex to explain, but we reached out to the NHS team and we made sure that we designed a solution that didn't add any burden to the supplier roadmap or the sustainable assessment evergreen. And we followed the greenhouse gas protocol and their recommendations, where you'll see spend-based method is bottom of their hierarchy. And we moved up to the hybrid method, which is capturing real life data from our suppliers, scope 1 and 2 data. I'll make that my last slide then, Pete. So this is our 5-step framework. You'll be able to access that on the link to our website that I've just put there. But we've asked our suppliers to follow these 5 steps. We've got 760 suppliers working their way through this step with this framework with very positive feedback. So it's more of a bottom-up capture of data. We've got a dashboard and we can get real-time year-on-year tracking of progress. We've found that we've got 98% support from our supplier base, and yeah, we're thrilled with how that's going. But get in touch if you'd like me to share any case study material.
Excellent, thank you. And as I said at the beginning, my apologies for having to cut you off. I will have to do that to every speaker just to keep on time. But and I'll just bring James into the spotlight so he can be preparing just while you close that down. But James is actually going to follow on from Supply Pilot and probably build on some of the work around supplier engagement. But I just want to say well done again for the leadership that Newcastle have shown and the leadership that you've shown, Annalisa. I always, like I said at the beginning, the numbers are absolutely fundamental, and you've done a great job of reflecting and refining them, and that's vitally important. James, I'll hand over to you. I don't want to eat into any more time, but yeah, we're all good to go, James.
And hopefully that's sharing okay. So thank you very much, Anna. Certainly showed us how much we can cover in 10 minutes. So quick context on me and Supply Pilot. So I'm CEO at Supply Pilot. As it says on this opening slide here, we help organisations engage with suppliers with strategy, exactly as Anna's just been talking about there. It's really important to share your goals, your framework, and how you move, collecting data and supporting suppliers through change. And Pete invited me along. If you look across the list there of some of the companies that we work with, see some medical connections with the likes of Walgreens Boots, but there's a lot of shared learnings. And if we think about these customers of ours, they've all got the same challenges of lots of suppliers. Just as Anna showed there, 70–80% of emissions are scope 3, and for many people it's purchased goods and services category. So basically, in the next 9.5 minutes, just want to share some of the thoughts about how that relates, some of those challenges, whether you're somebody in the NHS, as Anna, or a supplier to the NHS. This is a similar. So starting with NHS organisations, Pete alluded to some of these numbers, but overall, over 60% of the NHS's emissions are in their supply chain. They're in the blue bit on the right-hand side of this diagram. It's those indirect emissions. It's those purchased goods and services, which is from some 80,000 suppliers. So as part of that introduction, everybody needs to understand their scope 3 to have a plan, but ultimately turn it into something that is actionable to drive change. Again, teed this up for me wonderfully, Anna. Thank you very much. So basically, going back to our opening slide, it's to collect data from suppliers, to educate and inform them of where they're going, sharing best practice, sharing what's working for you, sharing what other suppliers have done to ultimately increase sustainability. As alluded to already, the GHG protocol talks about 4 levels, and most people will start with spend-based because it is easiest, but it is also the least accurate as recognised in the protocol. And what's important is not every supplier will be able to work with you at the same place on everywhere on the protocol. I've got another challenge for people in terms of using spend-based is not only do you run the risk that it's measured as going up simply because you're spending more, but it also throttles supply collaboration because the other way, because they see it being a pound notes exercise. They're worried about what it's going to be doing, and that distracts from actually we're trying to reduce carbon. It's great if you can go to the hybrid model, but ultimately you need to be quite near to the top of the pyramid to get that to happen. In lieu of that, we'd encourage people working around at the average base, which is at least ultimately, if we think about spend base, and you're trying to quit smoking, you know, how much are you spending on smoking? It tells you nothing really, because it doesn't say whether they're high tar cigarettes, low tar cigarettes, did you buy them at duty free, etc. The average based or unit based, as other people call it, that's said, just tell me exactly how many cigarettes you're smoking and what is the tar rating, etc. And that's a much easier way for many suppliers to engage. But the approaches I'm talking about here are exactly relevant for whichever method you want to use. It's getting the suppliers to engage and help you get the right emission factor, whether it be spend, average, sharing their scope 1 and 2, or ideally telling you they've done a life cycle analysis and they know exactly what's being required. Our own solution is issue agnostic, and the reason I went to this slide here and just bringing that point out is that there is a danger that because the focus is on carbon, people think solely about carbon and therefore solely about energy, and that's a big piece of things. But ultimately, we also want to reduce single-use plastic for all sorts of reasons in terms of microplastics, contamination of water, etc. But generally, if we're going to a more sustainable source of packaging that is easily recoverable and properly recyclable or reusable, it's reducing carbon. If we can focus on green chemistry and people can remove issues with, which is like bad chemicals for the purpose of a short presentation like this, their green chemicals are typically less energy intensive. And deforestation is a big one where we'll also see legislation coming in on that over the next year or two. Deforestation is huge in terms of clearly taking away that carbon sequestration. So when we're thinking about our supplier engagement plans, think about engaging on these multiple threads, because it actually comes to what is tangible and actionable. If you're a supplier to the NHS and you're a big supplier, you've got exactly the same challenge the next step down. And our tool works at both levels in the supply chain here. A trust can use it to engage with their suppliers. But if you're a large manufacturer of pharmaceuticals, PPE equipment, etc., and some of the suppliers on that list earlier are exactly that, they're using exactly the same, because you will have to publish your carbon plan if you're supplying into the NHS, and therefore you're going to have to collect data from your suppliers to educate and inform what you need to do. So our tool works at both levels by chain. Just another way of reiterating this importance of working with supply chain. You'd hope it extrapolates from typically 80% of the emissions being in that supply chain. But fundamentally, if this is research from McKinsey, by working with your suppliers, not just your largest suppliers, but across the suppliers, then you can have a 10 to 25-fold impact, depending which services they're providing for you, by working with them rather than your own direct emissions. And that is really, really important in terms of actually driving this change. If we're going to get to net zero, we've got to get all suppliers involved. You'll still spend your time talking to the largest suppliers and take an additional Pareto approach. Some examples, I said, in terms of, just relating what we've done. We were doing this with Walmart, taking some 20 million metric tons out their supply chain back before most people ever heard of Scope 3. We won awards for that back in 2013. Core principle, what I've alluded to here, is what ultimately getting all of those suppliers engaged with a clear mission. How can they all collaborate to get marginal gains? But the other couple of examples are just, we also pride ourselves on the level of engagement. And that's one of the hardest challenges when you're reaching out into the supply chain, is to get people to come on the journey with this. So in terms of something very practical and tangible, we have something called a Kickstart assessment. The Kickstart assessment is actually to help you do the exercise that Anna alluded to, that the Newcastle Trust's already done there, which is going out to suppliers to understand where they are. So it's not just doing it from your own spend, but it's going to suppliers and saying, for 6 different pillars, just take the first one at the top there in terms of carbon.
Last minute, James, sorry to interrupt. Last minute.
For carbon, where are you? What have you done? Have you got a policy? Have you got a science-based target? Can you spell GHG? Where are you on the journey? Break people into cohorts. But as I alluded to earlier, also understand where they are on some other pillars, which all roll up to the broader ESG goals, but many of them also roll up to carbon reduction. It's a fast, high impact exercise, no long-term commitment. So literally we can be live in a couple of weeks. We can start getting results within weeks. Hopefully in what we shared here, it helps you with that policy, understanding, awareness, as I've alluded to. Ultimately informs what you're going to do for your carbon reduction plan and helps you define an engagement plan armed with those different cohorts of organisations. So we're keen to work with NHS trusts and organisations who want to engage their suppliers to drive that change, get beyond spend-based analysis and actually drive those action plans and bring them on board. We're similarly keen to work with NHS suppliers who need to engage their suppliers for their own carbon plans, because together, working together and achieving that scale, we can have a greater impact. And just as with Anna, I'll post my contact details and these slides into the chat and would love to connect with anyone who shares those aspirations.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And again, you highlighted some really really valuable points, because it really does make you think just how big and complicated the supply chain is when you start seeing, and everyone's got the kind of knock-on effects, and some big players. Sorry, and some big players on there. Lynn, we can hear you. So if you're ready to go, let me welcome Lynn and Ronald from CO2 analysis, looking at machine learning AI to help us with some of that number crunching. So over to you, Lynn.
It's everything seems to have just frozen.
Now watch out. Well, we can hear you.
We
can hear you, and we can hear you and see you. If you need me to move to another speaker, Lynn,
no,
I can.
It's all right. It's all right.
Good.
My trusty technical assistant.
Good.
Here.
Well,
Good.
we can see you. We can see your screen, so you're good to go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Where would I be without him? So thank you. Nice to meet you all. Lynn Duncan from CO2 analysis, and I'm going to go into the weeds of scope 3, which is the really difficult bit. So let's talk a bit about the devil in the detail of scope 3, because it's quite devilish, as everybody's alluded to. So I'll be very quick with this, and I'll kind of focus on what we do. But just to, reiterate what everybody else has said, purchased goods and services are the knotty bit. And actually, when you get into the 15 areas of scope 3, they make up about 90% of it. And the challenge is that for large organizations like the NHS and its suppliers, you all have millions of line items of detailed purchases. And so when we, and in the NHS, where those are coming from are multiple systems. And that's not different if we're in a big supplier either. So in the NHS, typically those line items are coming out of the finance system, any e-procurement system organizations have, the pharmacy system, which is always a delight, and the NHS supply chain systems, because pretty much everybody uses supply chain. So by the time that you've got things spread across all of these systems, you've got, quite a sprawling world. And then you've got the devil. And the devil is the fact that we're, in our day-to-day work, we do not order things in the main off catalogue. The majority of what people buy is free text order. And free text orders means that we describe things however we happen to feel on the day. And so within our AI, and we've been doing this for a long time, we've been doing this for 16 years, we have 26,000 products that have been described in over 100 ways. So we're getting quite innovative here with our, people in our organizations. And we've got just over 400 where they've managed to create over 1,000 different descriptions. And that's quite tough when you're actually, trying to kind of unfangle all of that. So here's an example. We've got one trust who managed to describe the same pair of nitrile gloves in 102 different ways on their purchase orders. And here's just the first few of those descriptions. And I'm sure, those of you that work with data will recognize that. And the challenge is that when you try and get to grips with your line items, your procurement system and your finance system thinks you're buying multiple different nitrile gloves rather than the same pair of nitrile gloves. So, that just really, compounds the challenge. So is a detailed scope 3 analysis mission impossible? Well, it's not, but it is tough. So, you can't exactly, as Annalisa said and James said, spend at category level just gives you something pretty facile. It gives you something which tells you you've got a big problem, and it's quite arbitrary because exactly to that point, to Annalisa's point, a lot of the MRIOs are out of date, and it's very generalized. What the AI is doing, and we developed this 13 years ago with 2 universities, and so we've been doing it for a long time, makes it possible to actually take in all that horrible dirty data, put it into the AI, and it will go through and cleanse and code and carbon footprint millions of products and services every hour. So for most large organizations, it takes 2 days to do their carbon footprint in detail at products and services level. We do have some customers. I don't know if Heidi's here. I hope she is, because I'd like her just to say a word at some point. But supply chain's a bit bigger, so they take slightly longer. So how do we do it? And I think this is the meat of it. And this is back into this, spend versus hybrid versus. So what we're doing here is we're taking an organization's raw data and we're putting it into the AI. And the first thing that it does is it begins to look at that horrible mess that everybody's got, and it begins to try and sort out, who am I buying from? What products and services am I buying from? What purchase order lines have I got? What invoices? What credit notes? And once it's got a clear view of that, it moves to, this is my simplified version, okay? So I sat down with the mathematicians a few days ago to do this, and they gave me something that, went on for pages of sprawl. So this is the facile one you're seeing. But so stage 2 in my simple world is cleansing. And what it's doing there then is, once it's identified all of those different nitrile gloves, it's going, okay, we've got 102 of them. I can now convert those to one set of nitrile gloves. So it's deduplicating suppliers. So British Telecom, BT, BritTel, Brit-Tel, and all of that stuff. It's identifying our products and service instances. And then the third stage here is beginning to look at the product attributes and components, which is where we're beginning to move into a hybrid view. So what we're doing then, now we know about each of our nitrile gloves, is we have about 5,000 classifiers and experts that in the AI that then look at each of those nitrile gloves and go, okay, what do I know about it? Where do I know where it comes from, which country it comes from? And what do I know about, do I have transportation on it? Is transportation included? Do I have packaging? What can I do to understand the elements that make up this product or service? And then what we have sitting in the background is a load of data, global data sources. So we've got all of the multiple regional input-output models in all of their glory, and they're quite a mixed bag. Then we've got quite a lot of materials information, beginning to get into where people have worked out, what the carbon footprint of cement or steel or whatever is. And then we're down into wherever we can, capturing the carbon footprints that organizations have actually worked out through life cycle analysis. And what happens once we've got these cleaned up products is all of that is applied, and the AI makes the best decision based on the knowledge that it has from what it knows globally and what it knows about the product as to what the product or carbon footprint is for products and suppliers. And that then feeds through into a complete view for the organization of its overall carbon footprint. Then we split it down to departments. We do a full audit and reconciliation. So we're doing things like looking at orders, invoices, credit notes, because obviously when you get down into the detail of this, if I place a blanket order for £1 million, but I only get £100,000 worth of stuff in any given year, if I'm measuring my £1 million and thinking that's the carbon, then what I really want to know is what did the come in on the invoice, and what did I actually buy?
Last minute, please, Lynn.
Okay, so there's some pharmacy. And so what you can see there, we're down actually into, you know, things like Botox and the carbon dioxide. But I just wanted to show you very quickly in use. So this is a piece of work done by Northern Care Alliance, where you can see it's out, and it'll come on the thing. What they've done is they've used the data to work out the carbon footprint of a lumbar microdiscectomy. And you can see here that that basically the operation is the same input as flying return Manchester to Berlin, and it's split across both the inpatient stay and the operation, and the biggest contributor being single-use intraoperative equipment. So a bit of innovation in use there from data. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks for that, Lynn. Really good. Those that know me know I'm a bit obsessed at the moment with ChatGPT and other AI tools, and I do think, you know, this world that we're living in with such complexity, such big data, we need to start deploying innovative solutions and using these tools. So fantastic, thank you for that. I'm looking for Lee Jackson next with Smart Carbon, but I can't actually see you, Lee, on the screen.
You should be able to now.
Oh, there you go, Lee. Brilliant.
Hear me?
Brilliant, we can. Sorry, there you go. Thank you, Lynn. Really good presentation. Thanks for that. And yes, I'll hand over to you. Let me just, sorry, I didn't realise that I hadn't taken Annalisa off. But over to you, Lee, just to give us a bit more of a flavour and build on what Annalisa's talked about.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Pete. Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. So first of all, in terms of Smart Carbon, we are a team of carbon reporting specialists. We've been doing what we do since 2016. I'm proud to work for the organisation, and it's, although this may sound a little bit cliched, our role is really to enable organisations to be self-sufficient in being able to report and reduce their emissions. And that's important because we provide a lot of focus in the area of SME and micro organisations, and of course these are organisations that fall into people's supply chains, particularly the NHS, and these are people that are worried about whether they're able to do this properly. So we are truly multi-sector. We work across private and public. We moved into healthcare, having worked with local authorities and social housing groups in the Northeast. We undertook a project with Newcastle hospitals a few years ago to look at how we could bring better reporting through their supply chain, but also to tighten up the accuracy of the Newcastle hospitals reporting as well. So we can talk forever, can't we, about our basically our client list, but we're across all sectors. And what's important is what we actually do for organisations. We are helping organisations get on track across sectors with that UK goal of 2050. From an NHS perspective, we are helping organisations, both trusts and the supply chain, to get on track, of course, for this net zero goal of 2045. And everything that we do is guided by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol corporate standard. And so that means we have this emphasis on the 5 principles of transparency, being relative and accurate and complete and consistent. And we do this through structured learning programs in the classroom, in the workplace and online. We have our own proprietary reporting platform, which I'll come on to, and we provide expertise and guidance to help organisations of all sizes put in place reduction strategies. So if I come on to the area of how did that happen? The training, we provide formal training, which is IEMA endorsed through Northumbria University.
Sorry to interrupt. A few people are saying that we can't see any slides. Lee, are you referring to slides? Yeah.
I am. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. Wow. Okay. You should be able to see. Can we see slides now? Can we see slides now?
No, we can't, Lee. No, unfortunately not.
Just a second.
There we go, Lee. Looks like it's coming through. Good. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to keep you to time. So you've got 5 minutes.
No, that's
remaining.
fine. That's
5
fine.
minutes remaining.
Okay. So we run a reporting. We run greenhouse gas accounting through Northumbria University, and relative to this discussion, we have adapted that 2-day program, which is an advanced course in carbon accounting, and we've adapted that for healthcare, and we run that recently for the NHS through UCL Partners in London. So the next area of our service is that of providing the reporting technology, and that is right across. This is really important, especially for those organizations within the supply chain, because of course they will need support in reporting their scope 1, scope 2 and their own supply chain, which is incorporated within our reporting platform. It was built on behalf of a multinational, so it has the configurability to be able to structure your reporting by departments, by subsidiaries, and produce reports at that level. It's also been created so that it is in keeping with the greenhouse gas protocol. It allows you to move through that reporting accuracy and recalculate your baseline on a kind of multi-year level. Within each area of reporting, and we talked a lot about the supply chain here and how we move from expenditure-based to activity-based to ultimately supplier-based emissions reporting. We have that throughout scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3. So where we're supporting trusts and where we're supporting those suppliers, we are able to assist them in improving those other subcategories beyond purchased goods and services to move from activity to improve that kind of activity-based reporting and improve the accuracy of it within the platform. And of course, a huge part of what we do now has been moving from reporting into actual engagement with the supply chain, and so that's where we really have developed a lot of experience. The kind of awards that we've seen through the likes of Newcastle hospitals, we put down to our clients. We're there to support them, and we do so through putting in place programs that enables those suppliers to step into the reporting. So in the case here of a hospital, you start off with that screening process that Annalisa talked about, whereby you've got that expenditure-based reporting. You then move that onto this engagement with the suppliers. And what we're able to do is we have a relatively easy web-based reporting platform for those large multinationals who already know what they're doing. We're able to connect into procurement platforms so that you can reporting through that kind of technology. But actually, probably as important is that we then have use of our own platform and our own kind of guided programs that allows these SMEs and micro organizations to be able to step into the reporting piece, and then ultimately that feeds into our platform and provides you with a dashboard with your actually supplier reported emissions. The last thing, and probably the most important thing in all of this, is that we're here not only to educate and to report, but we're here to reduce, and we increasingly provide workshops and programs for those suppliers, including those suppliers to the NHS and the trust themselves.
Last 30 seconds, Lee, sorry.
Okay, to work through a reduction plan in line with net zero and focused on halving emissions by 2030. And so once we have the baseline emissions, we then work on that trajectory with the clients. So ultimately, we provide the expertise in accounting, we provide the platform, and we provide that guidance and support in terms of the reduction exercise.
Lovely, thank you, Lee. I'm just going to bring Adam in so he can start sharing his screen and getting set up. Just while he does that, just quick 10 seconds, because I'm sorry, Lee, I was checking the chat. I didn't realise you weren't sharing your screen, but thankfully you did, because you had some brilliant slides in there, really nice. You're doing some cracking work again. And the thing that I was reading in the chat is, yeah, there's a lot going on in this space, isn't there? But hopefully you're starting to get a feel from the speakers that there are the support resources out there. And yes, there are lots of different methods to calculate. And Adam's probably going to put a different spin on it as well, maybe talk a little bit about carbon accounting, but some of the other later stages. But just from my own perspective as well, yes, there are free ways to do it. And the analogy I'm going to use, I've got my own martial arts club. It's not a profit business. We just do it voluntarily. Of course, I need to do my own accounting. Of course, I can do it myself. I'll tell you now, the best thing I did was get accountancy software because it just makes life easier. And I think it's a bit like this. It depends how big you are as an entity. But let me hand over to the speakers, because I'm sure they will give more of a flavour of that. But over to you, Adam.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Can you see my slides okay? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Morning, everyone. So thanks for the intro, Pete. And I guess, as Pete said, I think I'm probably going to be purposely provocative for this kind of event. And I think the first thing to say from Zellar's perspective, my perspective, I think the sustainability industry has become very obsessed with reporting and measurement. Whilst absolutely important part of it, what's very clear from the IPCC reports, and I'm sure you've all seen these charts, is that fundamentally we're not doing enough. Even if we did everything we say we're going to do is not enough, but we're not even delivering on those policies and those plans as a country, as a set of industries that we've said we would. So the Zellar perspective is very much more about action and focused action and just starting to get industries moving. And I think that's really the crux of the kind of slides I'll talk about and the pilot we've just launched working with Pete across different parts of the health sector. So, you know, very clear and, you know, from our perspective, this isn't a health focused message. This is the message we give to all of our partners across industry. So it's all about taking that tangible action. So Zellar is fundamentally a software platform. I'll come and talk about the different elements that we bring to that. But really the focus for us is delivering a simple platform that in one place helps businesses do the measurement. So absolutely carbon accounting measurement is a core part of that. But more importantly, about usable, meaningful action. So a simple journey to help a business get onto the kind of sustainability journey, taking just the very basic actions, understanding their energy use, lighting, heating, water, waste, recycling, and start to chip away at those impacts, those emissions with really simple behavioural changes. And also then bringing in through the product the ability to switch services, so a marketplace to help businesses find deep green energy, to find better water services, to find solar, LED, installation for buildings, whatever it may be. The platform's really there to focus the attention and the energy on making change and chipping away at their current footprint. In the background, evolving the measurement of the footprint, but very much it shouldn't be an either or. We don't want businesses to spend time measuring before they take action. The action has to happen now and has to really step up now. We also then help engage businesses with local national biodiversity projects, volunteering projects, again, really about taking action now, working on those projects that can have a meaningful impact on emissions, on environment, and also just general social impact. And I think trying to drive to get to that kind of tipping point, typically of, you know, if 25% of people or businesses start to do this, that can really be the accelerator that we need to get the country as a whole making some meaningful change that's just not there yet. And all of this is wrapped up into what we've called the Zellar score. So the other element of the platform is about transparency. So being really clear what businesses are doing, sharing that across their network to their stakeholders. Around that, we've created a score that's really just a simple mechanism to demonstrate where a business is on their journey, with a view to ultimately we want the Zellar score to become the metric that's out there. In the same way, you know, everyone goes to TripAdvisor to look at a hotel, compare hotels. We need that simple metric that everyone can understand. So, you know, customers, suppliers, investors, employees, we need that in this market because it's just not there and there's not enough transparency. So as I mentioned, the platform, you know, fundamentally a software platform, £29 a month. It's really that simple. And this focused on 6 areas. So the emissions measurement. So, you know, we align to the GHG protocols, as the guys have talked about. We're not doing anything unique. What we've done though is make that purposefully straightforward. So we're not here to talk about really complex scope 3 measurement. Fundamentally, the majority of businesses are not doing enough on scope 1 and 2, which is within reach, before they even come to really complex scope 3 measurement. So understand your core scope 1, scope 2 and the core scope 3 measurement, all aligned to GHG. Take action. So a sustainability plan that the platform curates for you. It's effectively a targeted to-do list, and as a business works through their actions, it all feeds into your score, into your profile, and helps show the action and the impact you're taking. Utilities and green techs, as I mentioned, so a marketplace where we can help source deep green energy to really get a business onto renewable and drive down their scope 1 emissions particularly, but all the other tech that can help to reduce emissions. We don't charge commission, we're not making any money from this. It's all about bringing that together to make it easy, simple, accessible for businesses to use. Same with biodiversity and offset projects, you know, transparent projects that businesses can invest in to then reduce their footprint and have social impact. And then community. So we have a community feature within the platform that helps bring together, you know, whether that's a geographic community, an industry community, within a business community, all about sharing, learning, you know, telling people what you're doing and trying to build that momentum. And I've said a score around that. So all stakeholders, external stakeholders, can see what a business is up to and how they're making a change. So we work across a wide range of sectors, lots of regional authorities, so work with those local authorities to deploy the product out to local businesses. So typically they bring the funding, we bring the platform, the expertise. Working in education, so full spectrum from early years through to latter education, particularly the Church of England projects with the DfE. And then the core of our business is around corporate partners to get Zellar out to their end users. So Cooperative Bank is a good example, building Zellar into their banking offering to try and drive that change into small business. And then franchise businesses such as Volkswagen and the sports sector, where they're using Zellar to really make that change and report what's happening within their business and their sectors. So why is that relevant for health? So we've been working with Pete and the AHSN guys now for a couple of months to look at how do we bring those external learnings and actions into the health sector. So as I say, coming from a slightly different perspective to most of the guys on the call, this is about let's get this pilot moving, let's get changes in at the ground level and start to make some really basic changes for a lot of the primary and secondary providers that at the moment aren't yet further along their journey that we need them to be. So running a 6-month pilot process, I'll kind of share details on this. We'd love to get more people involved. So working across at the moment 3 geographic regions, bringing in pilot members. Literally this week we've just kicked off to say all about getting that, embedding it into those early pilot members, sharing learnings and just get actions moving. And this, we have a steering committee being chaired by Sir Andrew Cash that many of you may know, 4 decades in the NHS, up to CEO level in Sheffield. So he's helping to drive that programme and work.
Last minute, Adam. Sorry to interrupt. Last minute.
No worries. So last slide is really next steps, as I say, spinning the pilot up, getting the product out there. It's completely free and funded. There is no charge to join this pilot. It's being funded by Zellar. Contact myself, contact Pete if you're interested, and we are very open to get this out. As you know, it's all about getting out critical mass and driving action. We will then work with the sustainability champions within each of those pilot groups, manage that process through on board, get them onto the platform, help do the emission baseline, or just plug in the emissions that you've already calculated. But really, this is about focusing on action plans, emission reduction, bring the tech in that you need to, share those learnings, share them within your network, outside your network, and then into your supply chain as well. And we'd love to work with you guys over the next 6 months to really try and drive that change and drive those emissions down.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Adam. Right on point. As I said, we'll keep rattling through. We've got Laura and Diana next from Salesforce. Again, just while they get their presentations on screen, I can see you, Laura. Let me just add you to the spotlight. Thank you. Just take Adam off. Again, I just want to thank people for putting and collaborating in the chat. I can see a lot of it going on. I try as well and focus on the speaker, so I get a bit distracted in chat, so I try and listen as well. But as people are hopefully sensing, this is a big topic. There's a lot going on in here. There's a big supply chain. There's a big NHS. I'm a firm believer that there's enough expertise in this room. I think there's the need for all of us to be contributing to this big agenda. And we're the halfway point, but keep with us because we've got some brilliant other speakers left. Again, to just show where they are helping, and please reach out to any one of us. I know that I could see a couple of comments in there about people wanting to get some advice and some guidance. That's exactly what we're here to do, and every one of the speakers will, I'm sure, help you. So Laura, over to you. We can see your screen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pete. Thanks very much. Would you be able to just enable Diana's camera as well? Pretty please. But great to be with you all today. I myself am Laura. I look after the NHS Trust and ICSs for Salesforce. I'm joined by my colleague Diana Carter, who is one of our fantastic solutions engineers, who's also got a focus on NHS customers as well. Just wait for the slides to come up.
I can see your slides. The only thing I can't do is see Diana's camera. I can see yours, but there we go. Brilliant. You're good to go. Right.
Fantastic. So why would you talk to Salesforce when it comes to net zero? So Salesforce, we're a fully scalable software platform built to help organizations become more efficient and more productive. Part of our platform is we can provide customers with the tools needed to track your own journey to net zero. And we've done this for NHS England with the Greener NHS dashboards that are powered by Tableau, which is also a Salesforce product. As a company, we take sustainability very seriously. So just to give you a bit of background on what we do ourselves, as of September 2021, we powered our operations with 100% renewable energy and have achieved net zero emissions across our full operation. Additionally, we've also sponsored the COP26 at the United Nations Annual Climate, and we're also members of the UN Business Leaders Group, where we call on officials to help take more action on climate change. So if we go over to the next slide, please, Diana. I'll cover the 3 steps that we focus on when it comes to net zero conversations. So I think if a couple of the speakers have covered a few of these, but I'll buzz through it really quick. So first is to measure. So this is all about establishing your baseline and collecting relevant data in a simple and efficient way. Next, we analyze and build a plan based on up-to-date quality data. This is achieved thanks to analytics, dashboards, forecasting, and also the ability to do some what-if scenario planning. We then act and just see how you're progressing against target and what course of actions need to be taken. If I hand over to Diana, she's going to go through how a bit more of our net zero cloud and show us what some of what I've mentioned looks like in practice.
Thanks very much, Laura. So in brief, the the technology that we provide can help tackle a couple of key challenges. So one of them is actually bringing together data from many disparate locations, whether that's Excel spreadsheets, utility provider portals, ERP systems, and bringing that all together in a scalable way, and then giving you a structured guided process to validate that data, get it audited, make sure it's robust, and then all the way through to being publishable. That's one really key central tenet of what we can do. And round about that, what we've heard today is that there's so much of achieving net zero is about collaboration, whether that's internally with your clinicians, your estates managers. If you're in a hospital, they see the opportunities, they know what's happening, and they can come up with ideas to address. Or indeed, when it comes to working with your wider supplier ecosystem. So our platform is not just a platform for data gathering, validation, and digitizing that process that we know can be very painful and onerous. It's also a platform for collaboration and engagement. And I hope to illustrate in a couple of ways how that works in this brief intro. So if we start with what you might see when you log into the platform, it's really think of it like your virtual workspace where you can really see at a glance all the information that's key to you if you're a sustainability manager, or regardless of your role within a trust or another type of organization, you can tailor this to really be meaningful for you. So front and center, you might have your analytics broken down, see the sources of your data by location and so forth. And then crucially, when it comes to the really heavy lifting part, you can manage your tasks and activities through that data gathering process. So if we pivot over to the type of data that you will be handling, this might look very similar. It looks quite familiar, rather. It looks quite a lot like an Excel spreadsheet. And what we can help you do when it comes to pulling in data about the assets, the footprint, whose footprint that you want to gather, we can turn that into something really visual so that you can see exactly where you are, whether that's buildings, whether that's travel, whether that's your anesthetic gases, whatever it is that's associated with a carbon footprint, you can track it all the way through. And this can be fully tailored to whatever your process is. It comes with pre-built elements, but really the heart of Salesforce is a point-and-click customizable platform. So if we drill into one specific example, so this is an example of a hospital, and we can see the carbon footprint here. And then feeding into these critical CO2 numbers are the individual data points for energy, whether that's electricity, whether it's gas, cooling. Also, you can track for waste as well, water, to have a more holistic view of the environmental impact of your asset. And what we are able to provide is a pre-built formulae that allow you to convert the conversion factors that allow you to turn your kilowatt hours or your fuel into tons of CO2 equivalent. And of course, you can tailor these as well. Now, as you're working through this particular process, behind the scenes, you've got all sorts of flows to really help you speed things along, whether that's spotting data gaps or overlaps in data that you can fill in using either manual input or indeed some calculation based on comparable buildings. So these are lots of things that we can use to expedite the whole process. And as I mentioned, it's a platform for collaboration and engagement so that you can interact in context with, for instance, your facilities managers who might be providing bills. You can chat with them in the context of a particular record. So really trying to get rid of all those emails and spreadsheets that are often flying around. Now, very quickly pivoting over to the supply chain aspect, we have a whole host of pre-built capability to support you in this journey, whether it's that spend-based analysis that we talked about earlier. We know it's got limitations, but if that's what you've got and you just want to get a quick cut on where you should be focusing your efforts, we have a guided flow to capture that. And then, of course, it's that whole in collaboration with your suppliers. So our heartlands are really in CRM. We are also widely used across the NHS for supply chain. Some of you may know that it's one of our partners called Atomis has built a specialized procurement solution, all built on the Salesforce platform. And with this net zero capability, it can be added on seamlessly so that when you're looking at your supplier and having those regular contract review conversations or performance conversations, you can see and incorporate the data around their ESG numbers and of course their carbon. So it's really all in one specific place, and you can track those scorecards. Now, of course, you might be needing to do that at scale. So you might want to be inviting your suppliers to come and submit the data to you through a portal. This is fully customizable. They can submit that data and it flows directly onto the platform. And then, of course, you can be engaging. You can be gamifying. You can be educating, particularly if you're working with all those SMEs that we know there are who really need to be supported in charting the path to net zero. So
last minute, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
last minute.
Absolutely fair, Pete. Yeah. So in conclusion, this is really what we can bring, and I think what we're really keen to do here is find or to work with organisations that are looking to pull together a proof of concept to really test rapidly how can we put our data together and how can we engage with all those key players. So we're delighted to work with you and get something up and running in just a matter of weeks. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Sorry to have to cut you off. And again, I see a really good product there. And as I alluded to before, you can't underestimate the power of these platforms, the value that they add. And again, you made a really good point about disparate sources of information, about the need to pull them together. So again, well done for the work that you're doing. It looks fantastic. I'm sure Karl won't mind me saying he's coming on next, but we're going from a big organisation to a slightly smaller one, but no less important. So Karl, let me bring you into the spotlight, and hopefully you can give people a flavour of some of the work that you've started to do with your organisation. But thank you, Laura and Diana, and over to you, Karl.
That's great. Thank you very much, Pete, and great to be speaking with everyone here today. So my name is Karl Richter, and I'm the co-founder, and as you quite rightly said, Pete, we're a young startup called Isumio. Let me just move on to the first slide. And the software we've...
Sorry, I thought you weren't sharing your screen, but I think I've just accidentally changed my view. Can everyone see Karl's screen? Yes, good.
Sorry, it's my view. There should be a landscape. And
lovely, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
great. So the software we've developed is called Neoni, and our big claim is that it's the easiest way to decarbonize your supply chain. And so I'll talk you through a little bit today about our approach, and maybe start off with a little bit of background. And the core ethos that we're working around is this idea of radical simplicity. And we set up the company in 2021. And that was on the back of winning a competition that was set by the Scottish government. And they run an accelerator called CivTech, which is to catalyze innovation, to really, some of the difficult challenges that the public sector and the civic society are confronted with. And the challenge we were asked to respond to was, how can manufacturing companies decarbonize their supply chains and, in addition to that, leverage decarbonization as a competitive advantage? So we've really focusing on those two aspects. And although you'll see the theme of the slides might focus on the manufacturing sector, I think it applies very, very well to the NHS. And at the moment, we're currently looking at onboarding the NHS in Scotland to do a little bit of beta testing. And we're going through the usual admin that you would imagine as part of that process. But the reason why we were selected by the Scottish government and won the competition was because we were judged to have the best Scope 3 solution. And we were then, on the back of that, we received a contract with the Scottish government, and we developed the beta version of the software, which is now, we've just released, and we're now starting to test. And so what really sits behind our approach, and I'll start with where a few other speakers have also spoken, which is really about taking action. And I think also Annalisa had a statistic very similar to this, of about 70% of emissions are indirect and within the procurement process or within the supply chain. And therefore they're really difficult to know, but they're really, really important, because if that's where the majority of the emissions lie, if you're trying to achieve net zero, we need to know that, and we need to know that accurately. So our approach is to make that easy and to enable our customers to focus on their day-to-day business, whatever that is. And as I said in the intro, we're really keen to help our customers unlock decarbonization as a competitive advantage. We know that already some companies are either securing work or not securing work based on their emissions and being able to demonstrate decarbonization and low emissions. And that's the case here. So in the same way that we we see a landscape where procurement is often competitive around price. We can see a landscape where it'll also be competitive around emissions reductions, and we support that with clear evidence, which not only enhances reputation but actually allows organizations to undertake those actions of decarbonisation and identify the hotspots within the supply chain, to work together with suppliers and then implement the actions that result in decarbonisation. And the heart of what we're doing is really, a very, very simple idea. And I think anybody who's looked at the issue or been involved in the discussion will recognize that the indirect emissions of any organization at some point, if you follow them through the supply chain, are the direct emissions of supplier organizations. The challenge is that when supply chains get increasingly longer and complex, if you're applying a research-based approach, you're getting into a point where you're almost chasing your tail, and that research challenge becomes very, very convoluted, very, very laborious, and very repetitive across the supply chain. So our core thesis is very simply to get the data to flow about direct emissions and get that to flow and cascade through the supply chain. And we do that with our software solution, and in a way that's now a mirror image of the slide I just showed you before. And we start with organizations who are ambitious about their climate goals. And the reason for that is that they've probably looked at many of the other solutions that are out there. They haven't really worked, or they found that they're difficult, and so that they're ready for, they're looking for newer and more efficient solutions. And then the idea is to roll out, first of all, a free-to-use version, which is simple and easy for suppliers and their suppliers to input data. And our business model is then driven on the back of some of those organizations selecting and opting into one of the paid tiers of our software solution. But the important thing here is to be able to enable data to flow, and for there to be no barriers for the data to flow, because the key point here, if we're going to enable decarbonization at any point in the supply chain, is we've got to get accurate data to flow. So at no point do we put some sort of paywall in front of that process, where we do start looking to charges when we're providing added value to the customers, and they can opt into that if they want or if they don't want. And Pete, on that note, I'm going to wrap up and hopefully give a little bit of time back for a discussion.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'll just make some quick reflections, and I'll keep going through the speakers, because then I can have a few minutes at the end to wrap up. But thank you for sharing your story. We've got Sarah from Track My Carbon next, and again, just to kind of give another perspective on how to support suppliers, how to track carbon as an organisation. We've got a couple more speakers after that where we're going to look at it slightly differently again. So some of the work that Dan's doing, supporting the NHS, just with some of the information that's freely available, because I know that came in the comment. And then we've got Jump coming along to speak again a bit about their engagement, so that it doesn't just become about numbers. But again, I wanted to quickly make the sort of analogy to accounting software. There are lots of accounting platforms out there, but that is because it's such a needed entity. There's lots of businesses, and I see a lot of comparisons to this topic of carbon accounting, measuring impact, and hence why I wanted to show you a lot of innovators and show you some of the work. So as Karl said, brilliant that you've just won that contract with the Scottish Government. We've seen suppliers that are working outside the NHS. It's so important that we show the breadth of this. But Sarah, let me hand over to you. And as I say, we can keep. Can
you see me on my slide deck?
We can, Sarah. Yeah, we
Lovely.
can indeed.
Okay.
Lovely.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much for asking me to speak. So I'm going to talk about creating a compliant carbon reduction plan with Track My Carbon. And as Pete said, we've seen lots of other really good platforms, but I think that people need to choose what works for them and where their priorities are. So just briefly about me. So my background is I'm an adult and paediatric nurse who then went into medical device sales, who then went into the compliance side of tendering. So I've become a tender bid writer and looking very much at net zero and social value in supporting suppliers around those particular topics that are now very much a requirement in successful tender participation. So just I know most of you know this, so this is the reason that this came about, was because that we were looking at, we know that there's the delivering a net zero health service. We've got PPN 0621. The Health and Care Act in 2022 now sees that you have to, all NHS hospitals and suppliers are now actually in legislation, have to be including their green maps or their environmental targets as well. And we've also got the NHS supplier roadmap as well in place. So the main one that came to my attention was PPN 0621. This is a pass-fail requirement in tenders. There's a pass-fail requirement in tenders that where the spend is over 5 million. What a lot of suppliers are realising now, that if they're participating in a framework, even if their part of the contract won't meet that 5 million, they are in scope because the framework is in scope. So a lot of SMEs, a lot of suppliers are now having to develop and produce a carbon reduction plan which is compliant with all these elements in PPN 0621. And as I said, it is pass fail. You either have one or you don't. So what are the problems around that? So suppliers are at the moment overwhelmed with legislative requirements. We've had Brexit, we've got UK CA mark, we've got MDR, and we've got plastic packaging tax, and we've got all these other things that are being putting pressure on suppliers at the moment. And some suppliers are still unsure about how to actually be compliant around this particular element of PPN 0621. Also, some suppliers are not taking action soon enough. As a tender bid writer, I am often seeing suppliers come to me and say, we've got a tender, it's due in 3, maybe 4 weeks time. If I'm lucky, sometimes it's like 1 or 2 weeks time and we haven't got a carbon reduction plan in place. And it takes a while to get that data for that. So also the NHS, the NHS have got legislative requirements and targets to meet, and many of these can only be achieved with supplier engagement and participation. I'm not a software expert, but I fortunately know people who are, and so we've created a tool called Track My Carbon, which is a supplier solution. And I'm hoping, I might not have done my screen properly. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and just try again.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
I didn't put my sound on.
Don't worry.
So you should see my screen again, and please just shout me if you can't hear the next slide.
We will do. Yeah, we can hear it.
So track my carbon, it's designed to be a simple process. The platform walks you through. Obviously I haven't got time to show that today, but if anyone is interested in a demo, then please email me. I can either send you a demo for you to watch at your own leisure, or we can have a conversation. But it's a step-by-step process to go through putting in the data specifically for PPN 0621, and it's clear which are the mandatory sections for that. And then you get a downloadable report for uploading to tenders. We also know that that report has gone, some of our customers have put that through the NHS England carbon reduction plan checking service, and it's been come back as compliant. You can then upload the carbon reduction plan to your website, which is also a requirement for PPN 0621. So we want engagement with NHS suppliers. We're looking for collaborative working with trusts. We can help provide webinars and training on that to helping suppliers get engaged. So we want to collaborate, as I said, with the NHS. That training and support, so suppliers understand exactly what they need to do. And we believe this is a really simple solution for suppliers to meet the carbon reduction plan requirements. Within tenders, you've got the carbon reduction plan, which is pass or fail. You've then got the additionality of social value around the social value side of things, which the NHS is using fighting climate change for all of their tenders, and that's in addition to this. This is just the basic, almost your entry level to demonstrate to the NHS that you are compliant and you are on that net zero journey, and that helps, we believe, helps support the NHS to meet their targets with increased supplier engagement and compliance. So if you want any more information, I will put my some contact details in the chat as well. So we've got a website for Track My Carbon, and I've got my Amethyst Connect website as well. And please feel free to reach out and get in touch. And that's all I've got to say on that. Well,
very kind of you, and lovely, thank you. Yeah, thank you for keeping to time again. Perfect. And you made again some really valid points. Like you said, the tenders that people are submitting, it is important to get organised. And as I've said, I'm conscious that we're showing you a lot of suppliers, but it's absolutely essential. There should be no excuse really for us for not quantifying the carbon impact for a range of reasons, not just about tenders, but obviously for the health of the planet. And we are on the home straight now, but please keep with us, because Dan's going to give a bit of a perspective again from an NHS point of view, but how he's pulled together some of this freely accessible information so that people can start quantifying. So over to you, Dan. We can see your screen, so yeah, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks very much for letting me stop by. So I'm probably the weird one in the group. So I'm head of sustainability at Kent Community Health, NHS Foundation Trust, working for NHS all the time, and what I'm hoping to share with you today is a project that we've been working on over at Kent Medway Integrated Care System, Integrated Care Board, that really highlights the value of having this sort of information transparent and available, and also for many of the people on the call, how this can be used to support your business, can be used to direct what you are able to deliver and find your potential customers. Because at the end of the day, I think broadly we want the same thing. And I very much support finding the best solutions for these problems. So where are we going to go? So I'm going to tell you a bit about the problem we've got. I'm going to tell you about a solution to that problem. I'm going to give you an example, and I'm also going to highlight about the deployment so far. So the problem. So over at Kent Community Health, we look after about 3 million people across a huge area. And then back in October 2020, Greener NHS published a report, as I'm sure all of you have seen, that set out targets. However, it didn't kind of stop there. It stopped short. It didn't give us any methods, didn't give us any definitions. If you ask people about what NHS facilities entails within that left-hand column, that's a good question right there. So top-down reporting tends to be the way forward that National are doing it, and that's been shown to be particularly problematic. And I'll give you an example. Back in 2017, 2018, the last the last ERIC report that looked at fleet transport. And here are some examples about Stockport, Kent, Tees, Esconware, Derbyshire as well. Hopefully we've got some people on the call that recognise those areas. So we've got, yeah, pretty good. This is all the nationally supplied data, right? Then we've got Essex, okay, £3.3 million to do 14.4 million miles. Ooh, it's good value there. And then we've got Morecambe Bay that spent 1.5 million pounds on 30,000 miles. Who knows how they're doing it, but it gives an idea about the issue of top down, and really it needs to be more bottom up. So the Green NHS ultimately told us cup finals next Wednesday. Don't forget to bring a ball. We don't know what sport we're necessarily playing. So in that vein, people are rushing and they're trying to find, well, what sport are we playing? What are the rules? What's going on? What ball? And I've been in the position, as I'm sure many of my NHS colleagues have been. Person one comes to you and says, we know the game, we know the rules, and we'll let you play for in exchange for something. Person two then approaches, what's that yellow square, also knowing the game, also knowing the rules, and they will also let you play. So what the recipe book looks to do is it looks to be the other person approaching you that says that we're figuring out the game, we're establishing the rules, and that our team has the cup final next Wednesday. So we're working on this together. So the solution proposed was a shared methodology. So one way that we could compare apples to apples with our emissions reporting, extremely valuable, as I'm sure you'd all agree, to have that comparison. So you can say, this is happening there, this is happening here. How can we understand that one has got a legitimate problem, the other one also has a legitimate problem, let's say. And we've been working on that with our local authority partners and also all the trusts within the Kent Medway system. It features consensus agreed definitions. So what does it mean? What is included within fossil fuels when you're reporting it? I'll show you an example in just a second. It looks at calculations. So it looks at giving you the ball to play with and say, well, if you are interested, if you have the time to do this, this is how it works. In many cases, it might be the case you might look for an external support to do that, as I'm sure many of the business on the call, they probably found this, that people are looking for these solutions, right? But I think that you should have the ability to play with the ball, should you want to play with the ball. It's dynamic, so it's getting better all the time. So we're using this as a hub for consensus on best practice. So again, if your business has the best solution, can do it more accurately than anyone else, great. Get involved. This is all hosted on GitHub, so you can propose these changes, and they, if they're reasonable, they'll certainly be included towards getting the best possible approach that we can do. It's also scalable, as I mentioned, so everyone can use it. And there are lots of holistic benefits that come along with this. So by having access to the rule book and being given the ball, then it means that we can support upskilling within the NHS. So this is a problem that's not going away anytime soon. This is a long-term issue that we're looking to fix. Networking, a great way to meet other people working in the space, and to collaborate on shared projects. Resilience. So we're looking at this stops being an approach that is just relying on, at the moment it's mostly me, but we do have input from other people across the region. The dream is eventually it won't just be me. I will fade into the background, and instead it will be consensus provided by the people involved, and also steering the agenda. It's one way that we can highlight to, let's say, Alex coming up, that right, this is a problem that we've got. These are the emissions that we're calculating all together, and please help us out. So we've got a nice website. If I say so myself, it's quite usable at least. And then within there, then we click where you want. So if you want to find recipes, then we've got definitions, and then that will take you to the back end, which is the can be a bit daunting for some, but we're working on ways how we can make it a bit easier. However, the business opportunities there to kind of translate what we're doing and make it into a really usable format. Here's an example of what the reporting looks like. So I mentioned about clear definition. So for example, when you see that first row, fossil fuels, you know exactly what we're talking about. So we're looking at emissions associated with combustion of any gaseous, liquid and solid fossil fuels at owned sites and tenanted sites, where the reporter holds billing responsibility to the energy supplier. Fairly encompassing. In theory, you know what is contained within that figure. And then you might notice these little tags. So that gives an idea to the quality of that calculation. So reduced calculations are ones that back of the napkin, sometimes relying on top-down green NHS reports. Then we've got standard calculations, which are what we would propose you should be looking at as a baseline. This is the data you should have access to. Then we've got the optimal calculations, which is really to support the providers, whoever's reporting, going the extra way. And that might be more complex methods that might require a bit more support externally. So the opportunities, just to wrap up. So Kent Medway have undertaken a region-wide footprint bottom up based on this methodology. I think we might be the first region to do so, which is quite exciting. This sort of approach supports that system-wide strategy, which we're going to be required to do more and more. It supports that upskilling of people within these sustainability positions, which sustainability is still very new within the NHS, sometimes mind-bogglingly new. However, this is the way, these are the rules and this is the ball. This is pro-innovation. So for example, the optimal calculation for transport and vehicle emissions from grey fleet at the moment, it's to calculate, well, per journey, per vehicle, right? That's quite difficult when you do 9 million miles a year across 4,572 vehicles. So we figured out a way how to do that. And that tool is also open source. And it is pro-business. So the analysis takes skill. There's no getting around that. It's not easy to do, and that's why you have formed these businesses do it. But
last minute, Dan, thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Vic. I think the value should be in highlighting that you have the best possible solution, can report the best possible way, as opposed to keeping the rule book and the ball. And also, this rule book is kind of teeing up the issues. So where we might be lacking a calculation or might be missing that best practice approach, this is how you do it really well. Great. That is teeing up a solution that you guys can provide. So that's been me wrapping up. Thank you very much for your time. Very happy to speak with anyone about anything, but particularly about the recipe book. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dan. And again, really nice to start as we come into this latter part of this session to again give a real NHS perspective and some of the work that you've tried to do to just help people and hand it on a plate. Because as we've seen in the chat today, there's a lot of information out there. There's some brilliant information out there, but you've kind of brought in a system just to pull that together and to try and provide that transparency. And as I said, it's always great to hear from the NHS on their perspective. Last but not least, in terms of our supply speakers today is Rob about Jump. And again, we've done a lot about carbon accounting and measurement, but hopefully Rob can give a slightly different spin on it as well, around behaviour change. So over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. And thanks again, Pete, for pulling together such a great event. I'm Rob Marsh, so I lead the business development team at Jump, and I'm joined by my colleague Laura, who's just pulling the strings on the slide in the background. We've got the privilege of taking up one of the last spots today, so I'll try and keep it nice and punchy. Today's short session will be focused on driving behaviour change and engagement through technology and comms, which we believe should be a key component in every organisation's net zero toolkit. And in Pete's poll at the very start of the session, this was, I think it was the second priority for many of you or overall on the call. So hopefully this will be of interest to many of you. So first of all, a bit of an overview of who we are. Laura, if you next slide, please. So for those of you who've not come across us before, Jump's a technology and engagement business that helps organisations really to create and embed a culture of sustainability by bringing their people on the journey. Our mission is really all about helping empowering and motivating people to take action for a sustainable future. So it's these small actions that people can take that really sit at the heart of all of our programs. It's our belief that no matter how ambitious, previous slide, Laura. It's our belief that no matter how ambitious an organisation's sustainability strategy or net zero goals are, they can get there a lot quicker if they're bringing their people on the journey. So that's exactly what we do with more than 60 organisations through a combination of technology, communications, gamification and rewards. And we're really proud to be working with, as of last week, 25 NHS trusts across England to help them to communicate and engage with their people. And last year we were successful in a bid and an award through SBRI Healthcare to further develop our product as a tool to support the NHS in driving engagement and behaviour change across the greener NHS agenda. So lots of cool new developments coming this year. It's quite an exciting year for us. But why are behaviour change and engagement so crucial when organisations are addressing sustainability? Next slide, please, Laura. So the world's changing, and I appreciate I'm sort of preaching to the choir a little bit probably here, but being able to attract and retain talent is always going to be key to any organisation. 83% of millennials would be more loyal to an organisation that helps them contribute to societal and environmental issues. 83%. So therefore, having a clearly defined strategy and a programme in place to help organisations to do this at work and help people do this at work becomes a key way to attract and retain talent. Next slide, Laura. These attitudes aren't just limited to the workplace, though, and actually they're driven by a much bigger shift towards sustainability around the world. And again, I appreciate the audience that's on this call, but globally, 85% of people have shifted their purchasing behaviour towards being more sustainable in the past 5 years alone. Next slide, please, Laura. And according to a recent Deloitte survey, along with the cost of living crisis, climate change is the #1 concern of millennials and Gen Z. Together, this demographic now makes up the majority of the current and, of course, the future workforce. Most organisations are kind of waking up to this reality, but many have still not yet made the important connection between their sustainability work and their people. So that's the sort of gap that we fill, really. Next slide, please, Laura. And it's been more than 6 months since the Climate Change Committee announced that behaviour change and engagement from people across the UK would be vital in ensuring we meet our net zero targets. But changing behaviours isn't easy, is it? It requires a collective effort and a variety of tools and techniques to communicate a clear message that inspires people to join a movement, really, and to take action wherever they are on their journey. It really requires winning over hearts and minds, which is a really tricky thing to do. Next slide, please, Laura. But that's exactly what we do at Jump. So we build and deliver fully customized sustainability engagement programs. Essentially, we get to grips with an organization's sustainability strategy and net zero goals, and we reflect that through the program. It's largely delivered through a web-based platform and a unique app that's different for every client that we work with, and it really reflects the identity and the culture of the organization in terms of look and feel. It looks like an internal program, basically. And then we build in a range of activities that employees can take part in that are really designed to drive the behaviours linked to the organisation's sustainability strategy. As people take part in activities, they're rewarded with points which place them on leaderboards and reflect the organisation's structure. And then the points also set off different award and prize mechanisms, which acts as another motivator for a lot of people because everyone loves to win a prize for something. And a key metric for us is usage and engagement. That's really how we're measuring success. And we attribute environmental metrics to some of the activities to help provide an estimation for the sustainability impact of everybody taking part in the programme, both collectively and individually. So people can see, as a result of me taking part in this programme, this is my environmental impact. This has been the impact of the actions that I've taken part in, and this is what my team's impact looks like, and this is what my whole organisation's impact looks like. So that's quite a powerful message to be able to deliver. Then in addition to the technology, we provide a fully managed service. So every programme has a programme manager and a comms manager at Jump who are really charged with driving awareness and engagement in the programme. And that's a big challenge, you know, just because you could have the best app or piece of tech in the world, but if no one knows about it, then no one's really going to use it. Next slide, please, Laura. So as this session is largely about data, I did want to share some of the highlights from our 2022 impact report and some of the things that we relay to clients to demonstrate the success of their programs. It's worth mentioning that a lot of the environmental data we collect is really indicative. It's not as robust as, say, you know, taking an electricity reading from your meter or looking at your energy bill, but it does help to paint a picture for the impact that collective action can have. So it is quite powerful. So a key metric for us, as I've said, is registered users, and we're really interested in that engagement. So how many actions are people logging? How many times are people using the program sort of regularly? Last year we recorded more than 3.6 million actions from over 71,000 users, which resulted in an estimated saving of more than 5 million kgs of CO2, more than 3.3 million miles travelled sustainably, and over 702 kilograms of waste recycled, and more than 1.1 million kilowatt hours of energy saved. Next slide, please, Laura. Oh, your battery's running low. Those big numbers are great, but they don't mean much to everyday people. And it was great to hear from Newcastle at the start of the call. We run a program with the amazing team there called Shine Rewards, which reflects a lot of the behaviours they're trying to drive through their sustainability strategy. And this is just an example, really, of some of the comms that we created with the team there to bring it to life a little bit. So you've got Shine Rewards members have saved over 150,000 kg of CO2, which is equivalent to 1,671 flights between London and Paris. So that's the sort of tone that we take. We make it light, we make it inclusive and accessible. We try and make the program as broad as possible, and communicate with it in a way that people will understand as well. Try and bring some of this really heavy data into sort of tangible things, basically, to show. Last
30 seconds, Rob. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I'm just drawing it to a close now. Last slide then, Laura. So that's it. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully it was interesting. If you'd like to reach out to us for a chat, you can email me at rob.marsh@teamjump, or just connect with me on LinkedIn and we can set something up. Thanks again, Pete, for giving us the space.
No, you're more than welcome, because as I said, I think it's important to show, you know, we've done a lot around carbon quantification, but there's other pieces of this jigsaw. And last but not least, Alex, I know you've been putting some things in the chat, but it's going to be great to finish this session off with some of the work that NHS England are launching. I think we'll probably hear some things that might be fairly hot off the press. So I'm going to hand 10 minutes to you, if you wouldn't mind just saving. I'll give you a 30-second, 1 minute warning, if that's all right, and then we'll wrap up for today. But brilliant to have you with us and to talk about the work of NHS England, please.
Thanks, Pete. I feel for people on the call. There's a lot out there, isn't there? There's a huge amount of resources, lots of opportunities to get involved, some great work happening and innovation. I guess my message is a couple of things. I mean, obviously I've got some things I want to talk through specifically, but just also to say that so much of this is happening at a national level. I've been sitting on this call being a bit kind of like, oh gosh, please, if you are looking at doing some of the investing in some of these great companies that are doing these fabulous things, let's talk about it, because we've got a lot of things happening in NHS England that I think will help solve some of these challenges on an ongoing basis. So just a little bit about our program. This slide, I think if you haven't seen this slide, you probably haven't met me. This is our Net Zero supplier roadmap. This sets out the way forward for our suppliers between now and 2030, and it builds on the delivering a net zero NHS plan that was mentioned a few times earlier in today's session. essentially, we are trying to be really clear with suppliers what our minimum standards are, and how we want them to work with us going forward to get us to net zero, which is obviously an incredibly urgent issue. I won't go into too much detail on this. I know at the beginning we talked a little bit about our 2028 milestone around the carbon footprinting of products and services. And this is another thing that my team is looking at really closely, and in collaboration with Greener NHS, as to how we really set that out in a way that's manageable, achievable, and meaningful for our suppliers, but also for us as decision makers within the NHS. So exciting work happening there. We have a couple of things. I did mention this in the chat, and I put this slide together whilst on the call, so it's not particularly a beautiful one, but we do have a Greener NHS dashboard that includes our emissions data collected from suppliers to date. So we have 3 years of historical data collected through CDP of I think 256 of our biggest suppliers. At last reference, we are uploading additional information shortly onto that. So additional the latest data onto that. So good source of information. It doesn't give you every single supplier to the entire organization. I do appreciate, but it does give some really good granular data about some of our largest suppliers. So I think Agnes also helpfully put in the link to register for OCTA if aren't already on there. The other thing and the really big thing I really wanted to talk about, and I hope will really be a solution to lots of the challenges discussed today, is our national program around data collection. So we have the Evergreen Sustainable Supplier Assessment. It is built, it is tested, it has had people go in and try and break it, and we've been trying to make sure it's fully ready and up and running, because we're going to be launching this in June at NHS Confederation, which is happening in Manchester. Our launch is on the 14th of June, so we'd love to see you all there. And essentially what this is a single place where suppliers can provide their sustainability information and data, including their emission sources and their baseline emissions and their progress against those. And then that will integrate with our procurement portal, our procurement platform, Adamus, which will then mean that suppliers will be given a level based on their submissions, and that information will integrate straight into the procurement process. The idea is that this really becomes a very integrated, straightforward, free of cost to suppliers and to NHS organizations method of collecting our sustainability information and tracking our progress against that. And it's I think really exciting. It's going to take some time to bed in. We need to get our suppliers on it. We need all of your support as suppliers to get on and use it. When it's ready in June, but also for those in NHS organizations to signpost their suppliers to Evergreen. This is going to be, I think, a really great way of having a single source of information for our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So really, there's lots to talk about with Evergreen, and I don't have a lot of time, so I will hold off on giving you too much detail. And certainly there'll be more at the launch in June, as well as through other forums. But just to say, just to reiterate that our program is launching on the 14th of June at Confed. We'll be providing ongoing support, and we really do see Evergreen growing with the organization and with the program, and we really are excited about how it will work. It's something information will be available to, even if you're not on Adamus, it'll be available through the Greener NHS dashboard. So it's something where we'll have a free source of information for everybody's emissions through that. This is not really a direct flow of in my presentation, but I just wanted to also mention, because I know we talked a little bit about carbon reduction plans. So for the suppliers that are on the call that might be wondering about how they should make sure their carbon reduction plan is okay, we run a free checking service as a team. So we have, if you've developed a carbon reduction plan, we don't do the carbon reduction plan development from the very start. But if you've got a carbon reduction plan, you're thinking, I hope this is okay. I'd love another set of eyes over this. I'd love to just make sure that I get a bit of a peer review of this. My team runs a free service to do this. You can email england.crp-check@nhs.net, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. It's run within my team, so we don't have external resource to help with this. So we will do our very best to get back in as quickly as we can. But really, as soon as you are ready, and please do send those through, because we really want to make sure that we get them back to you in good time. So if you are an NHS organization and you are signposting as well, it'd be really great to let suppliers know about this. We've got this resource in place until the end of September 2023, at which point we will see what our team resource is looking like. So hopefully we'll be able to continue it going forward as well. And I think that's all I wanted to cover in the slide specifically. But yeah, just really excited to work with you guys, and Evergreen, I think, will be a really fantastic platform for us all to collaborate in a single place. So look forward to speaking more about that. Thanks.
Lovely, thanks, Alex. And again, I'm hoping people have enjoyed today. As I said, we've been on a big journey. A couple of key points for me as well is that the time is now to start acting. And I think, as Sarah mentioned in her presentation, we don't want to be leaving this to last minute to start thinking about where are we on our journey, how do we change behaviour of our staff, have we even got a carbon reduction plan in place, does it meet a quality requirement? These are all resources that we need to tap in. And again, as we've seen today, we've got obviously companies that can support and are supporting, and we're bringing some of this information together that might be free to use, and if people have the confidence to do that. But as I said, I think the main message certainly from me is, we must start doing something. And the NHS is absolutely huge, and the supply chain of the NHS is absolutely huge. And this is why, I'm keen that we keep all banging this drum, supporting each other. As I said, I've seen some brilliant collaboration in the chat and people connecting. Do not be frightened to ask questions to me. I'm sure Alex would say the same. On this topic, we need to be transparent so that we can help the NHS achieve its net zero aims. So my ask is that, please share the recording with your networks. If you've heard from someone today that you really think, one of your colleagues would really benefit from listening to, please send them that little snippet of that particular 10-minute presentation. Look out for the opportunities to collaborate, connect with some of the companies that have spoken today who want to look at either testing, trialing the product. But the main thing is, let's get some action going. I can see some brilliant faces and familiar faces on the call as well from people that have come and listened in. And as I say, I can see familiar faces on the chat. There's some great work out there. We must keep the emphasis on this. So just please help us all create this enthusiasm for this, as I said, I think fundamental topic. If we do not start measuring and monitoring and getting that engagement right, we're never going to achieve net zero.